Hello guys, this is Sean Hoot here and welcome to this tutorial where I will show you how you can easily integrate Stripe into your Dropsource project so that you can process credit card payments in your mobile app. I have broken down this tutorial into these three easy to follow steps and we will just go through them one by one. So the first step is building the payment form. So go to your Dropsource project, create a page, and then add these input fields to receive the credit card details. Most importantly, we need a field for the card number, the expiry dates, months, expiry date year, and then the CVC. Finally, add a button that when we click, we will make our API calls, right? Okay. You may also add a page, confirmation page, that when the payment is successful, we will transition to. In my example here, I have this simple page, and then I'll have a text field, a text view that I will display the charge ID. So that's all for the first step, building the form. The second step is importing the Swagger file or the API specification file. So I have created a Swagger file that you can import into your project to be able to do the charging. Later on, you could build your own Swagger file and have several other endpoints in it. So to import the file, just come to your project, go to the API tab, click on the plus sign here, and then enter the Swagger specification file URL that I'll provide under this video and also in the Dropsource forum. So you paste it here, click add, and then you will see this Stripe API appear here. Now, once it appears, you will have to click here, then select tokens, and then add, select charges, and add, and you have these two endpoints here. So that's all for how to import the Swagger file. The next step is we need to authenticate the API. So Stripe requires that all APIs are authenticated using basic authorization. So we just need to put this parameter authorization in the header and then provide this value, right? Bearer and then a secret key, which we can get from our Stripe dashboard. So let me show you how to get this secret key. So come to your Stripe dashboard by going to stripe.com, logging in, and then developers, and then API keys. Then you will see we have secret key here. Click on review this, and then you can now copy this, right? So I copy it. Then in Dropsource, first we need to create a device variable that you'll be storing this value in. So just create any string variable, give it whatever name you want. Here I called my authorization token. So if you are in iOS, make sure Swift string. If you are on Android, Java string. So once you've done that, come to the API here, then these three dots, click here, then set authentication, and then you will see that there's authorization here. So all you need to do is click edit, and then select your device variable, and save, and you are done. Now, even though we've assigned the authorization parameter to this particular variable, we haven't actually set the real value to it. So to do that, we can put it on the page load event for this particular page. So click on the page, then come to events, and then under page load, click click add, and then set value, add the set value action, and then assign the authorization token variable, whatever name that you gave yours. And in the value field, you click on edit, then you can select static input string, and then you type this keyword bearer space, then you paste the secret key that you copied from your Stripe dashboard, as I showed you, developers keys, and then this. Okay, so we do this and we've authenticated our API and we are ready to make our API calls. Okay, so that's all for this. So for the last two steps, I'm going to actually first show a demo of the result of this, and I'll use that one to explain these two steps. Okay, So now let's go back to our project. I've already built it to save us time. So click here and then I'll run it in the simulator. Then tap install it. Okay. So we are installing the app in the simulator. Okay. So to test this, I'm not going to use my real credit card. So what I will do is that I'll just go to Google and then just search for some testing cards. So Google Stripe test cards. Okay. Then click on testing Stripe, the first link you see, and you have available to you a lot of testing cards that you can use. So I'll just copy this first one. It's normally my go-to card, and I'll click here, paste it. For the expiry months and year, just enter any valid month. Then for the year, just enter any valid year in the future. For the CVC, you can enter any three-digit number. Now, before I hit pay button, let me turn on the network activity log. It's very advisable to always have the log on so that you see the API calls that are being made. Now I can hit pay. Okay, payment is being processed, and boom, our payment was successful. Okay, before I explain the API calls here, let's verify that this payment was indeed successful by going to our Stripe dashboard. So as you can see, this payment, the charge ID was 1DT and it ends in WA. So let's go to our Stripe dashboard, then go to payments, and hopefully it's this last one. You see, 1DT ends in WA. So we click on this, and as you can see, the card that we use the 4242. That's the same card that we have. It was for an amount of 25 Canadian dollars, and it says the payment succeeded, and it gives us the charge ID also here. And Stripe charges a fee of $1.03, and so this is the amount that comes to our account. Okay, so yeah, everything worked. Now let's look at what happened. So we see that there are two API calls that were being made, tokens and then charges. Now let's click on the tokens and then look into it. As you can see here, this call was made to stripe.com, right? Let's click on the charges. Again, same thing, stripe.com. This is very important. What this means is that both calls were made from our phone to Stripe directly without passing any data to a backend or some external services, right? For sensitive data like credit card, it is always advisable that you do most of the processing client side as much as possible. Because the data is sensitive, you don't want to pass it through your server where it might be compromised. Okay, so it is important to know that these two calls were done client side directly from the user's phone to the Stripe service. Okay, now what is the meaning of these two endpoints here? Now the first one is the tokens endpoint. By definition, tokenization is replacing something or substituting something of greater value with something of less value. So in our context of payment, if you look down here, the form data, that is the request data, you realize we are passing the credit card details. Do you get it? And these are sensitive data. So we send this to Stripe, and in response, Stripe gives us a token. So this is a non-sensitive data. Now, because this is non-sensitive data, it is okay if we have to pass this to our server or whatever, because if somebody gets access to this, it is not revealing anything. Also, Stripe tokens are one-time use only, meaning once you use it for this charge, if we were to use this token for another charge, it will say that this token is no more valid. Okay, so the first step is we make a call to Stripe to tokenize the card by getting this token, and then we make a second call called charges, where we are right now going to charge the card. So in the charges, we pass the token to the source parameter, and then we specify the currency code. So CAD for Canadian dollars. If you are using US dollars, you can use USD. You can search for other currency codes from the Stripe website. Then for the amount that you want to charge the card, even though we entered $25, we see 2,500 here. This is because Stripe uses cent values, meaning that if you want to send $1, you have to send 100, which is 100 cents. So we had to multiply this 25 by 100 to get 2500, which is 2500 cents. Okay. So in response, when the charge was successful, uh, Stripe just sent us all this data, and it gave us the charge ID, which we displayed on the next page, and our payment was successful. So now that we understand how this works, let's go to how to create them. So we have our API endpoints already here. So just as we explained in the demo, all we need to do is click on the tokens, and then in the parameters, click here and then choose form data, and you will see the parameters. Then we need to just bind these to the values here. So for the name, the card name, I can just click drag. For the credit card number, it is a string, I can click drag. For these three fields, the month, year, and then the CVC, these are actually supposed to be number values. So you can't just click and then drag on it. If you do that, it is going to return a string value. So to get a number value, for example, for the CVC, uh, sorry, we will come to the card CVC, then element, and then select whatever field that is storing the CVC, then select text, and then select end value. This will make sure that you are getting the end value of this particular input. So you do that for these two other fields. So now we've bounded the form parameters, and in the response we get this ID. So remember we said the tokens endpoint returns an ID, which is the token for the card. So that will be stored in this value. Take note, there's another ID down here. We need this one. So this is the one that we should use. Okay. So we can store this ID in a page variable. So I define a page variable called Stripe token. And so in the 200 response for the tokens endpoint, I will store this the Stripe token, that's the ID, in the token variable as you seen here. Okay. Now the next step we need to do is, remember that I said we need to convert the $25 to 2500 cents. So to do that, I use this calculate math expression, and I get the value of the dollar, and then I assign it to a variable that I'm calling dollar amount. Then I write my math expression here. So dollar amount times 100. So we are converting the dollars to cents. Then in the so as you can see, this returns an NS number. So in the next action, I will just store the value of this expression, the integer value, right? You see, that's why we have integer value. I will store the integer value into a new variable called amount sent. So this is what we are sending to our charges API. And then now I can run my charges API request. Okay. So now let's look at how we set up the charges API request. So that's very simple. So you click here, parameters. Again, we have other information. We are just interested in the amount. So the amount, what I do is that I just bound it to the amount sent that we calculated. Then for the currency, I just use this static field called CAD. You could get it from a dynamic variable or whatever. Okay. Then the sources parameter, this is very important. So this is where we are going to pass the token. So remember, when the tokens endpoint returned, we saved it in a certain variable called Stripe token. So I just bind it to this. So now we've set up this also. So in the responses, we are going to get all this data. You could save them, whatever one you want. But in our case, what we wanted to do was we wanted to display the charge ID, and that is down here. So this charge ID is what we saved. So I come to the events, and then in the events, I just do a go to the next page, that's the confirmation page, and then I pass that ID to the next page. So if you come here, you realize on this page I have a page variable. You see, it is required doing navigation, And that is why on this page, in the API, that is the charges in the 200. When I was doing the transition, I passed the charge ID. Okay, so basically that is it. So let me just give a summary of the process again. So when this button is clicked, right, in the events, we run this tokens endpoint, and I added this show progress overlay. If you saw in the demo, the moment we hit the button, we had this payment processing, right? So yeah, I just added this one. So this will call this tokens endpoint. Then when this tokens endpoint returns in the 200, I set the tokens value, I save it into a page variable. Then I take my dollar amount and convert it to a cent. I save it into a variable. Then I run my API request for the charges. Now when the charges return, in the charges response, I just did a go to page, and then I transition to the payment success full page, and then I passed the ID, that is the charge ID. So that is it. And I have some other we have a 402, which whenever there's an error, it will have a 402 response, so you can do whatever you want to do here. I hide the progress overlay. The same then for example, if you go to let me see the tokens, did I hide the overlay? Because you are going to a next page, actually the overlay will just go away. So that's it. Okay, so I hope everything was clear here and you understand everything. So the things to note here is that we are not making any call to a backend. As you can see, this whole app, the only calls we made were these two, and they were to Stripe directly, as we saw in the demo. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. And in the next tutorial, what I would like to do is I would like to show you how to set up what we call webhooks, so that when any event happens in Stripe, it will notify your backend. Okay, goodbye.